We have hosted this event, this conference, to discuss these agendas. For welcoming remarks, please allow me to invite the President of the AUA, Mr. Bruce Borisson. Որպես Հայաստանի ամերիկյան համալսարանի նախագահ, ինձ համար մեծ պատիվ եւ ուրախություն է այսօր ժանգալեցած այսօր այստեղ COP29
on human rights and environmental protection. I'd like to begin by thanking our guest, renowned environmental activist Greta Thunberg, and all of our remarkable guest speakers who will be on these panels today for joining us for these important discussions. Ms. Thunberg has been credited with raising public awareness about the climate crisis in what has actually become known as the Greta effect. She's been included in Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People, named the youngest Time Person of the Year, included in the Forbes list of the world's most 100 powerful women, and has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. We're delighted to welcome her here today. Today's conference was organized in response to the decision by the United Nations to designate Azerbaijan as the host of COP29, despite the fact that it's an authoritarian petrostate, despite the concerns over its track record of aggression and ethnic cleansing toward the people of Artsakh, and despite the authoritarian policies and the Armenophobic rhetoric of the Aliyev regime. As noted by Ms. Thunberg herself in an opinion piece that was published in The Guardian just 2 or 3 days ago, by holding COP29 in a country that is openly planning to expand fossil fuel production, a country where oil and gas account for 90% of exports, the meeting has been exposed as an exercise in greenwashing. It has been co-opted by petroleum interests who are openly making deals in the meeting hallways, as evidenced by the COP29 CEO himself, who thought at one point that he was steering oil and gas investors to contacts in the Azeri oil company SOCAR, when he was actually talking to investigative reporters from Global Witness. If you haven't seen the video online, it's well worth watching. How cynical and perverse it is when oil deals are being made in the hallways of a conference supposedly devoted to addressing climate change by the conference CEO himself. If the United Nations is serious about addressing climate change, it's long overdue to exclude the polluters from the COP meetings instead of letting them run the show. Through today's informative sessions, we will address the impact of Azerbaijan's actions on both human rights and environmental protection in the region. A key point here is that 3 things. Number 1, ecocide and climate destruction. Number 2, corruption and authoritarianism. And number 3, ethnic cleansing and genocide are in fact closely correlated phenomena in today's world. And understanding the mechanism underlying this correlation will be crucial in the effort to stop this brutal spiral toward dystopia that has already gone much too far in places that we all read about every day, such as Palestine, Yemen, Lebanon, Ukraine, Sudan, the Congo, yes, Artsakh as well, and many other parts of the world. The struggle against those who would trash the Earth's ecosystems for profit, the struggle against corrupt oligarchies, and the struggle against settler colonialism and genocide are in fact related struggles. The American University of Armenia is proud to host these very important and pertinent panel discussions on topics of such pressing concern. Our institution, founded on the principles of academic freedom, intellectual discovery, and community impact, has always stood at the forefront of such important conversations, and I hope we always will. Indeed, you'll have the chance today to hear from some of our own faculty engaged in addressing these issues of human rights and environmental advocacy who will appear on these panels, and I'll be very proud to see them on stage today. I hope that you take advantage of this opportunity to gain a full and comprehensive understanding of the urgent issues that are at stake. I look forward to hearing the questions and discussions that will follow during the Q&A session at the end of the program. Thank you very much for joining us here today, and I wish us all a productive, informative, and engaging conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pogosyan. And now I would like to
Dr. Pogosyan, այս պահին ուզում եմ հրավիրել դոկտոր Իննա Նապլամինին, որը դասախոսում է Հայաստանի Ամերիկյան համալսարանում եւ կլիմայի փոփոխության փորձագետն է, հատուկ ելույթով նա հանդես կգա Հայաստանի կլիմայի փոփոխության հետ կապված, կլսենք մարտահրավերները եւ հնարավորությունները այս ոլորտում.
Thank you very much, and first of all, thank you to AUA for hosting such an important event today. And let me be very brief. I want to make sure that in the contrast to, unfortunately, very fossil fuel-dominated COP agenda today, we showcase also success stories of countries like Armenia that could potentially be a poster child for a climate-smart transition. Before I do so, let me also thank AUA for being very open and being a leader in climate education in Armenia. It's been now 2 years that AUA leads as an institution in higher education, giving the opportunity for students to learn a subject called the fundamentals of climate change. And this is an important undertaking by AUA because we're educating conscious leaders for the future, leaders aware of their mandate, aware of the mandate of the governments and of everybody involved for the protection of environment and our climate, and of course the ecosystem and biosphere. So let me very briefly reflect on where we stand as a country in terms of the vulnerabilities and in terms of what we can do as a small nation in tackling this major challenge of planetary size. Armenia, unfortunately, is very vulnerable to climate change. We have already witnessed a 1.3 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, which has affected every ecosystem and, of course, human livelihoods. We have already seen a 9% decrease in precipitation, and this has impacted virtually every sector of our economy. We're living through climate crisis as we speak, and adaptation is a critical agenda for the country, and investment in adaptation, particularly in water resource management, in agriculture, in building the right infrastructure to protect the livelihoods of people and our ecosystems. And in contrast to that, unfortunately, we as a country are a very, very small emitter. Our emissions constitute about 0.02% from the global inventory of emissions. However, we're not too small, and as the saying goes, every small nation can make its impact. And as I said in the earlier, Armenia can be a poster child of climate-smart transition because we import 63% of our energy resources, namely natural gas. And for Armenia to decarbonize, it's a matter of national security. It's a matter of energy independence. So investing in renewables and decarbonization for Armenia is not a means to an end. Investing in decarbonization is a matter of national security, energy independence, securing livelihoods and economic growth. And it is very important when we speak of these important mandates of what the country can do in terms of contributing to reduction of our emissions, we speak in numbers. So Armenia currently suffers because of fossil fuel-based economy, which is driven by imports. We're suffering from major air pollution that impacts health of our population. Currently, it stands at 10.6% of our annual GDP, the impact from air pollution, mainly coming from transport and burning fossil fuels. However, investing in decarbonization could add significant economic benefits to the country. Similarly, investing in adaptation, investing in water management, investing in agriculture. Currently, we're unfortunately losing up to 70% of water in the water systems. And investing in adaptation would mean securing our economic future, securing our food security. Let me be brief and in closing state that protecting environment is not an option. It's everyone's mandate. And by doing so, we protect human life, dignity, and future of our generation. And it's not a coincidence that we connect climate change to climate justice and to human rights, because environment and our biosphere is a public good, and it is everyone's mandate to protect it. Thank you.
Շնորհակալություն Տիկին Ղափլանյան, եւ հիմա առաջին պանելը մոդերացնելու համար հրավիրում եմ Տիկին Լուիզա Վարդանյանին.
And the panel members.
Ողջունում եմ բոլորին եւ շնորհակալություն եմ հայտնում հետաքրքրության համար. Առաջին պանելի ընթացքում քննարկելու ենք
we're going to be discussing the impact of Azerbaijan's aggression on Armenia and Artsakh, the military aggressive actions, the violation of human rights, and allow me to present the speakers today. Anna Melikan, Advocacy Without Limits, NGO. He's in charge of the legal aspects. Guillaume Stefanyan, from Artsakh, Human Rights Defender. Siander Sarkin, International and Comparative Center, Chairperson, an advocate at the European Court for Prisoners of War, arag, an expert in international law. Thank you so much for accepting this invite. Let's start from 2020. September 27th, it was morning, we heard the terrible news that Azerbaijan has unleashed large-scale military actions against Armenia and Artsakh. The war took place 44 days. And every day, each and every day, we received information about the losses we had, about various forms and manifestations of violence and aggression. Ms. Melikan, could you please tell us during the 44-day war what violations of human rights were recorded and how were we able to obtain that information, and whether it was possible to obtain information regarding the violations of the rights of different groups, that is women, persons with disability, and children.
Thank you for the invite. Thank you for this opportunity. From the first perspective, it seems that these two panels have nothing to do with one another, but on the other hand, military actions against Artsakh before 2020 and after 2020, they were a very vivid, obvious indicator that Azerbaijan is not only doing greenwashing, but also is doing peace washing now in COP29. pretending to show that the so-called liberated areas, the areas that they have conducted ethnic cleansing, they are going to be using to receive green energy and protecting the environment. Therefore, the violation of human rights within the military aggressive actions are directly related within the topics of COP29, which they are bringing forth. In 2020, when the military actions were initiated, I believe all of us could try to understand what is it that each one of us can do. What are the two pennies we can bring, both with the professional skills that we have and the personal skills that we have, in order to add one drop of solutions to the bucket. We were a few partners and friends. We decided that we had legal advocacy companies, NGOs. We said that we believed that we could help the victims achieve justice. If we cannot prevent the violations, at least we can try them, do the aftermath to receive justice. Unfortunately, I must mention that this was not the first time. Back in 2016, we were doing similar activities. We were trying to identify the military crimes, war crimes that occurred, and we were working with the soldiers, trying to help them to receive justice, to have fair trials and access to justice. But in 2020, we did try to do a fact-finding mission, because it was obvious that even though the international media outlets were related, but international advocacy companies were very, very passive. I mean, any of the violations of human rights, they were not there. In 2020, we registered a serious violation of human rights, international violations, and within that fact-finding missions, we spoke with hundreds of displaced persons, with victims. We had the opportunity to visit Artsakh and cooperating with the local authorities. We have visited the communities. We have recorded the violations ourselves, but in reality, the war crimes, the Azerbaijani military personnel, they made it very easy for us in 2020 and even after that in social media, especially in Telegram. The videos were immense, where they would portray the war crimes both towards civilians as well as towards military prisoners of wars. This was not that they were not even shameful, they were not even afraid of any responsibility, but they were also pride. But the mission they had was to terrorize the local populations, to ensure that the villagers will leave their homelands knowing that what is their destiny if they remain in their villages, to ensure that military servants will not resist them, understanding that what will happen to them if they become prisoners of war. So 80 civilians who are considered to be dead in 2020, half of them have been killed as a result of the threats and an intention to be killed. And most of them were elderly, people with disabilities, and people with mental issues. All of you probably have seen some of the videos, some of the most violent and brutal cases, but they were much more than what you have seen. And not all of them have publicly been violated. Unfortunately, we had to see when people had been executed, other torture. But all of this, we have heard some part of it, but we have not spoken about women who have become victims. At least 7 women, according to the data that we have as a result of expertise, they have been tortured and executions. And they have been tortured until death. So they had been alive when they were prisoners. They were in the hands of the soldiers. They have been tortured to death. We have not spoken much about this, but there were many famous cases where the Armenian women became the victims of such result. It was only after that they started speaking that it was not only men that were the victims of the most serious brutal actions, but children have also been killed. But the reasons that children were killed, they were not selective. Weapons have been used, and that's why they have been killed. So Azerbaijani soldiers have not targeted the military. They have not targeted military units, but they have just conducted mass destruction for everyone, anywhere, at any time. We also speak about the prisoners of war which have returned back, and they have told us about the tortures that they have been through, which they have been going through throughout the whole years that they were prisoners of war. At least 3 years they were prisoners of war, and we have some of those soldiers who have spoken with us. We need to speak about a number of violations. I spoke about intentional killings, but not less. We also had publicly showcased other cases which they were very proud to show about the defilation, desecrations of the bodies that they were doing. We also had cases where they were killing the soldiers and they were being shot mass with large numbers, and they have specifically been videoed and portrayed publicly. What was the main reason of this? That there was nothing responsibility. There was no punitive measures, and they were not even expecting to be punished. So this was the main reason. However, it's unfortunate that even international communities, the result that they showed was not comprehensive. They did not condemn such violations. There was only one case, it was the Hadrut killings, that was a bit publicly presented on the international level. The other cases were not responded to by the international population, and one of the reasons were that the international society, they consider that land as Azerbaijan's land, means that they should not actively get involved or condemn these issues because it was Azerbaijani land. So as a result, we have 2022, where we had the military prisoners of war on the land of the Republic of Armenia, which were tortured to death and killed. Also in 2023, but my colleagues will be speaking about the others. Thank you so much for the comprehensive presentation. We know that after the 44 days on November 9, November 9, the ceasefire agreement was signed. Nevertheless, after that, but there were different scale aggressive actions that were still ongoing on behalf of Azerbaijan. On the 12th of December, 2022, Azerbaijani protesters, they closed the road that connected Armenia with Azerbaijan. Armenia with Artsakh, the Lachin corridor. Mr. Stepanyan, that blockade was more than 9 months long. How did the population survive during that blockade when it was impossible to transfer passengers, transfer cargo? How were the food shortages resolved? What about people who had special medical needs? How are you able to provide these services to them? Thank you so much. I would like to greet Greta and thank her for being active. You have raised comments about Artsakh issue. The president of AUA mentioned in a important remark, he spoke about the phenomena called Greta's effect. Unfortunately, when we had the rights situation with the violation of human rights of the people of Artsakh, we did not have Greta's effect. It was not only in an environment when everything was impunitive, impunity was the norm. On the contrary, different states were encouraging Azerbaijan within that impunity norm. And COP29 in Azerbaijan, after the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, organizing that is a very, very vivid example that not only are we not speaking about impunity, but we are encouraging the perpetrator on an international platform. Speaking about the blockade, after the 2020 war of Azerbaijan, it was a systematic and consistent ethnic cleansing policy, just their next tool. There was nothing to hide. It was just an action directly aimed. And by the way, Azerbaijan did speak about that after organizing the blockade. I'm sure you know about the famous video that was called "You Can Even Tame a Wild Cat." So as the wild cat was considered the people of Artsakh, and using hunger and torture, they were trying to tame this wild cat via deprivation, hardship. About the humanitarian impact of the blockade, It's very difficult to use words to express the situation that was in Artsakh. Words are not enough. And now, to come back, to have a retrospective view and to relive all that, it is a bit amazing. Like, how can human beings go through that all? Yes, indeed. It was amazing that how could the population of the world, how could the community of the world just come forth with empty remarks, empty statements, without any actions, in front of the eyes of the whole world. 120,000 children, 30,000 children on a daily basis, they were deprived. That we had cases of dying of hunger, we had cases of malnutrition. The most vulnerable group was those persons with disabilities and having diseases. There was a deficit of medications. And what we received from the world were merely statements, empty statements. The efforts we had to input were just unimaginable, just to get something from the RCRC. About the situation, to give objective information about the situation. I mean, this is not right. Even if you're a humanitarian organization, you have to ask them, you have to beg them to come forth with an objective statement. Something is going wrong in the system of human rights defense. I can speak about specific cases. Yes, I'll speak about just one case. Well, it was Vagif Khashadarian. There was the Hakar, on the Hakar bridge, he was kidnapped. Even the Red Cross, there was very difficult. Even the Red Cross had very, very many difficulties. I remember the discussion with the Artsakhi woman who had issues with his kidneys and they couldn't do dialysis. The woman was crying and saying, it's better if I die here than they take me. And on the way, if I would be kidnapped by the Azerbaijanis, by the Azeris. A very simple example. Very simple example. To be abducted on the way. These were the choices the people of Azerbaijan had. I'm sorry, the people of Artsakh had. Not to mention about the food, the lack of food. How did this lack of food have an impact on children? On a daily basis, we would receive calls by doctors saying that because of malnutrition, these are the impacts. People are losing their consciousness. They are fainting, especially during the summer. They are fainting on the streets. A number of cases have been registered. Not only registered, but these have been raised. These issues have been raised. And the issue is that all these remained without any punishment. Impunity, total impunity. And not impunity, they were encouraged by the head and the states of many countries. And they are organizing COP29 in Azerbaijan. This is just double standards, hypocrisy. The most vivid sample of hypocrisy. It's very difficult to speak about human rights after all this and values. Speaking about vulnerable groups, and speaking about food, lack of medication, people with chronic issues, chronic diseases, what was the daily battle they had for their medication? So just literally, it was an everyday battle to go through that all. They understand the suffering they're going through, to raise these issues. It was just immense torture for all those who were trying to advocate for the human rights in Artsakh. During that period of time, and the irrelevant or absent statements by the international community and no impunity of Azerbaijan, what was the result? 2023 in September by Azerbaijan, the next regular aggressive actions, and the ethnic cleansing was just there. Up to now, until 2020, we had 145,000 Armenians living in Artsakh. Now we have 13 Armenians living in Artsakh. 13 Armenians living in Artsakh. This is the picture. Just the facts and figures say it all. And the whole world, you can see what is the agenda of human rights. Yes, we do have the foundations for it, but practically, I mean, it's just something on paper. And it's just for It's just if you see the level of the advocates on an international level, it is not transforming. It is not translating into political actions. It is just paperwork by the advocates. That's all for now. If there are any additional questions, I would love to respond to them. Thank you. All of us understand how difficult it can be to constantly speak about such heavy and difficult issues. Excruciating is what can be about the blockade of Lachin corridor. It was not the end. It was not the end. As you mentioned, in 2023 September, Azerbaijan continued another attack on Artsakh, and on the 24th of September, the corridor was opened, and the mass exodus of Artsakhi people was what took place. Mr. Ghazarian, in international law, is that considered as ethnic cleansing or genocide or something else? Do these ethnic cleansing and ethnic actions, are they different? Is there any differentiation in different contexts? Could you please clarify these definitions? The legal definition depends on the intention, on the goal, on the purpose. Azerbaijan, you know that in criminal proceedings, in court proceedings, they try to present, 2 days ago it was the International ICJC, they try to present that as an impact of the war. Of course, there are enemies and cities and villages should be destroyed, trying to hide their intent. But the international courts, they're not political debates, places for political debates or discussions. It's not like those who have more political leverages, they can win. No, here it's a matter of norms. Why is Azerbaijan so afraid of going to court proceedings? Because in court proceedings, the truth is revealed, identified very clearly. There were 2 cases that Armenia took to the international court and they won. That no, there was an intention. And the killing of military personnel and the killing of civilians. All these were orchestrated very well with a clear intention behind it. And in the context was forcibly displacement. 2 days ago, there were an article by the advocacy, not academic title. They said, where are the Artsakhi Armenians? This was the heading of the article. I mean, if for 2,000 years they have been living there, and they are not there today anymore, I mean, how can you explain that? People just decided to change their location? No, they were exiled. They were forced to leave using military actions. So the intention is of paramount importance. And intentions only can be proven by evidence, by facts. And Armenia had presented such a large array of evidence that even the international community had no doubts that this was forcibly displacement. Thus, their right to return should be exercised. And Azerbaijan is afraid of this. Not only is afraid, but cannot refuse their right to return. Even though in international courts, you don't have that term right to return, but it is also a normative phenomena. This is just a traditional norm, it's what it's called. So throughout the course of centuries, states have acknowledged that those who have been forcibly displaced have the right to return back to their homeland. It's another situation that Azerbaijan uses it in a mirror-like facts. They're bringing forth mirror-like facts and saying in that case that the Azerbaijanis should have the rights to return to Armenia. And Azerbaijan mainly, if Armenia is bringing forth the right to return, Azerbaijan is trying to counterbalance it with what happened in 92 and 94, which you saw on the November 12th decision that the court decided that we, starting from 1996, we should start studying the facts starting from 1996. So let's speak about the right to return. What is this right to return? The last time in Europe, in 2 days, 200,000 persons were forcibly displaced in Europe. That took place in Horvatia. The Serbian army, in 36 hours, it's called a storm operation. They forcibly displaced 200,000 people, and there were abductions, kidnapping, killings in Cyprus in 1974. We had the forcibly displacement of the Greek people, but up to now the European Court is making decisions. So Azerbaijan understands very well that the longer the time flows, that burden is going to become heavier and heavier on their shoulder, and they cannot reject and refuse that the people of Artsakh cannot have the right to return. On the contrary, they are just trying to bring counter arguments. They cannot deny their right to return. Thus, they are working on their counter arguments. The right to return is directly related with the concept of motherland. Return to your own country is the phrase that plays a very crucial, important role. It's not the country that is emphasized, and country is not affiliated with your citizenship. No. It is the word country is associated with your nation, and your nation is associated with such components that we decide what our homeland is. It's your work, it's your community, it's your job, it's your community, it's the church, religion, being a native, being authentic to that area. These concepts you will see in the verdicts at the European Court. And Azerbaijan understands. So Aliyev all of a sudden understand that they have the Western Azerbaijan. So probably somebody gave him a tip that if you're only speaking about the assets, that yes, we left assets in Armenia, well, you will not succeed. You will not succeed because the theoretical basis is not strong. But if you speak about the motherland, the concept of motherland, the Western Azerbaijan was within the borders of Armenia, here you can have a larger, bigger impact. That we have history there, we left our manuscripts there, we left our temples there. No, but in reality, we just have the assets, real estate. But this is nevertheless, this is Azerbaijani policy that everything that Armenians are bringing forth, which is truthful, that Artsakh has been the motherland of Armenians because they want to give a strong foundation. That they're not saying we left in Armenia only houses in Armenia, but we left our motherland in Armenia is what the Azerbaijani people are saying. And scientists say that if they want, they can bring such elements and they can pinpoint to such elements. Nevertheless, today, the international community statement now is negative towards Azerbaijan. Why? Because there are no Artsakhi people living there, but Azerbaijanis are already returning to their own houses, if we're speaking about the 7 regions. And Azerbaijan is afraid of legal proceedings because speaking about the right to return, if they found out that Azerbaijan is internationally criminal country and has conducted a number of crimes against humanity, even crimes against humanity. And that's why they want, from the Republic of Armenia, they want to bring their legal case, call it back. And they just want to solve it via political discussions because here Azerbaijan has an advantage and they can asymmetrically relate the right to return with the right to return of the Azerbaijani people. That is why these political proceedings are important because here we have the rule of law. We have This is why even the country who has lost in war, let's say if the football, let's bring an analogy with football, let's say it's even if you are a loser, you have lost the war, you can still become a winner, like 4-by-1 in the international court because lots of the myths, they were just gone to zero. And Armenia had the right to return. That's very briefly for us to understand what is the right to return. It's not only going home, no, it's coming back to your homeland. And your homeland has nothing to do with your citizenship, as Aliyev was saying back then, accept our citizenship and return back to your country. No. Motherland is, according to the Human Rights Article of European Convention, there are a number of components that all of us who are sitting here, how is it that we see our motherland? Even this building, we can consider it our homeland because where we have studied here. So all these are related, are component with the right to return. It's just that we have to implement them and exercise those with our day-to-day lives. Thank you so much for explaining this very important topic in very clear language, in simple terms, an important topic about which we mentioned briefly. Now let's just give different numbers regarding their figure, the numbers. Azerbaijan gives different numbers. The Armenian civil society gives other numbers. They give larger numbers. And Mr. Hakian, I would like you to speak about that, but not from the perspective that how many prisoners of war do we have, but from a broader perspective, that those who are either detained or do not have freedom, what do we know about these persons who are arrested? What information do we have? Who are imprisoned? Վերոյդյադ ինչ որ ապ չի լսվում։ Բայց իմ մոտից չէ, էլի դահլիճից։ Դահլիճին պրոբլեմ կա։ Under what conditions are they in now, those who are imprisoned? How are you able to communicate with them? Are there any forms of communication with this? Thank you so much for this initiative. A special thank you to our special guest today and for raising awareness about this topic. Allow me to mention that overall wars, how are wars done? Those who have military advantages, those are the ones that move forward. But the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict is very specific. Why? Because deciding on the destiny of Armenians has become an way of leveraging interstate relations. It is one of the means of exercising one's authority. And those who are imprisoned now, the Armenians, and the continuous arrests of those, they are part of their state politics. And this is uncertainty. They did not know whether their family members were POWs, and this was also a way to cause mental and psychological torture. Of course, the ICRC, thanks to their activities, the abduction cases were proven, and those in the later stages, there were also opportunities to have video calls with the prisoners of war. It was important that they were alive, to understand their health status, to have information about this. And if I try to give figures or numbers, the situation will be like this. In 2020, starting from the 2020s, hundreds of Armenians have been abducted, more than 300. With immense efforts, about 210 prisoners of war have returned. But those that have been returned, they were abducted on conflicts regarding the border, or they were just lost and they were in Azerbaijani lands without finding out, and they were not returned to their motherland for a long time. So returning them to their motherland was not directly related with those prisoners of war related to the war, but also those abducted before the war in peaceful situations who have been arrested or abducted, cases not related to war. So we have 23 Armenians officially are now imprisoned. When we speak about their status, we use different terminology. Most of them we use prisoners of war. We also have hostages. The other term we use is hostages. Because, why do we say that? Because they're returning them to their country is not related with the conflict, but they are using this as a leverage for political gains. And for the 23 persons, we have 5 persons who have been abducted in 2020. The other 18 people was in 2023. The year 2020, when I said 23, this includes the leaders of Artsakh. 8 of them are the leaders of Artsakh. So we have 8 political prisoners on behalf of the previous leadership of Artsakh. And we have 15 persons who are captives relate within the activities of Latching Corridor and military actions context. So this number includes both civilians as well as military servants. So we have both civilians and prisoners of war. So setting these persons free are related both with political, diplomatic, and legal works. There are not a single international mechanism that is fighting against the torture. They have not ever been able to enter and visit the prisoners. Their communication with the external world is only through ICRC. But during the early stages of the conflict, even ICRC's entry was blocked. And many months later, when some prisoners were returned, ICRC had never, ever visited them. We have such cases as well. About other international bodies, the situation improved slightly, that these visits are taking place now. These are regular, nevertheless, their frequency cannot prevent any torture. Speaking about ill treatment and torture in this mechanism, the legal support is of paramount importance. The lawyers also are doing what they can. They are the links that can identify ill treatment, torture. They can raise these issues to advocacy bodies. And so from this perspective, the Armenians there are vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, because regardless of what the lawyers, they do not have independent lawyers. But those lawyers who have been licensed in Azerbaijan and an environment where it is full of fear, those, especially the public defender's office, what can they do? They are unable to provide any legal services. So their participation, all this is just formally. Aside from one Armenian, all the others have public defenders. That's all. And those who have been returned to their motherland, when we meet with them, they come to prove again that their meeting with the lawyers were just formal. They have not visited them. They have not discussed the cases. Sometimes whenever the observers and the proxies have seen their lawyers in the court for the first time. So this practice is even worse than any other. And they have been ill-treated in the presence of the lawyers. So the special observers, they have also been part of the overall politics of the state, and they have treated the Armenians, they have shown ill treatment to them and torture. We have had numerous meetings with those prisoners of war which have been returned to Armenia about how they have been treated, those who have been repatriated. We have paid special attention to the vulnerable groups. Interesting pattern that even if you have a few of the vulnerable characteristics such as age and gender, they have not been given special protection measures. So they have been ill-treated with the same intensity, not being military servants, let's say being women, and even if they have been elderly. So even these three vulnerability characteristics have not changed anything. Those who have not even been part of the war do not have any military advantages, and they could not give any value to the military actions. They even weren't protected against ill treatment and torture, which clearly shows Armenophobic actions, that we have deeply rooted systemic Armenophobic policies that are being implemented. They have been mass violence, have been organized both physically and mentally. Just to understand the physical violence, I can just say that people have died during the violence. We have cases where the regular beatings and violence and torture, as a result of this, a person has just died in a closed area, just died because how severe the violence was. And this was as a result of the violence. This was not that they have targetedly been shot. They have merely been because of the severity of the torture and the violence. About the psychological violence and abuse. This has also been used, of course, throughout the whole process. One of them, they have shown the other prisoners how they are killing others. They're putting them in a situation where the person truly understands that how high is the threat of him or herself being killed, where they have forced them to dig their own graveyard, in a tomb where he was going to be buried alive. We're not speaking about separate cases, one or two, taking into account their personal interests, no? But the humiliation that has occurred, that has also been there. They have degraded and humiliated the persons to conduct such actions as kissing the Azerbaijani flag or making statements against their own beliefs. Forcibly, they have been forced to make such statements. We have also had cases related to religion. These people have been specially tortured who have identified their Christian values or items if they had crosses on them, or they have tattoos. Tattoos directly has resulted in burning the people. They've burned different parts of the body to destroy the tattoos on the body. If they are religious symbolic tattoos, we understand that why this has been done. We have clearly proven cases when they are forced to learn Azerbaijani or to read books which have one-sided policies about Armenian-Azerbaijani relations. For instance, about Armenian terrorists, there have been books and they have forced the prisoners to read them. But these are just surface level manifestations, and for very obvious reasons we are not following up these, because we have such other gross violations that we need to follow up. About the ICRC, they are continuing their activities. Nevertheless, not all of them are using their rights during the visitations. This was a topic of discussion in the media as well, that many Armenians are refusing to make a phone call or for video calls. They are refusing their right. There's the theoretical right, but they are refusing their right. I believe that there is psychological and physical threats. They believe that not to communicate, not to share chaotic information and information, not to share information that might raise levels of anxiety and much more. And of course, there are suicidal attempts as well, which are extremely concerning. And in this moral psychological state, these persons, they also refuse to contact their families. That's all for now. Thank you so much for presenting this topic, this very, very important topic, and sharing such information that would most probably not be available to the public. All that was presented was just surface level information. Every topic is so comprehensive. There is so much more to say. So very soon we'll have a Q&A session where we'll be able to speak about this all. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the presentations. Այս բանը ուզում եմ Greta Thunberg-ին հրավիրել այստեղ. Every topic is Կարող եք այստեղ նստել. Կարող եք ձեր ականջակալները վերցնել.
Okay. First of all, Greta, I would like to ask why you decided not to go Azerbaijan and participate this event on climate change, the biggest event of climate change, and instead you decided to come to Armenia and be here with us during this side event.
First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who's here, to the organizers of this event, and to the other panelists for sharing your invaluable perspectives on this. Actually, the reason why I'm not personally at COP is very, very simple. The basic principle of climate justice that me and many other climate activists, that is the reason why we are climate activists in the first place, are completely incompatible with the COP29 being held in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, as previous people here on stage have said, is an extremely repressive state, a petrol state that is planning to expand fossil fuel production and is responsible for ethnic cleansing. It is absolutely nauseating, to say the least, the hypocrisy, the extreme hypocrisy that this climate conference, COP29, is being held in that country right now, and has been held in countries in similar situations the years before. Not only Azerbaijan crimes and not being held accountable, but also they are given a path and legitimacy and a platform on the world stage to legitimize these extreme human rights abuses and ethnic cleansing and greenwash this. And the world stands silent and gives them that opportunity time and time again, because of course this is not the only case. We need to stop pretending that having climate conferences in places like this, countries and states that are extremely repressing their own population, which many Azerbaijani activists that I've spoken to describe it as if they are living in a prison where their basic human rights are being stripped away from them as we speak, and are experiencing a continuous crackdown on civil society, and the voices who are demanding change are systematically being silenced and captivated. Also, as we have heard today, the ethnic cleansing that Azerbaijan is guilty of, and the continuous extreme hardships that many Armenians are facing because of the Azerbaijani military aggression, the torture, forcefully displacement, prisoners of war, hostages, and the ethnic cleansing and the extreme physical and psychological violence that people have experienced can in absolutely no way be justified. And the fact that the world continuously remains silent and let Azerbaijan greenwash these crimes is absolutely unacceptable. And another perspective is, of course, that Azerbaijan is a country completely built on fossil fuel production and are currently planning on expanding this production and exports. And the world that continues to import this fossil fuel from Azerbaijan and continues to be silent about these humanitarian crises is, of course, complicit. We cannot pick and choose which humanitarian struggles and which human rights abuses we are speaking up on, because if we are standing up for justice, that has to mean justice for everyone.
Thank you, Greta. Now I think that everyone wants to ask. And near them. Okay.
So, Ms. Thunberg, first of all, thank you for addressing the COP29 issue at such a scope and for supporting the Armenian and Azerbaijani discussions. My question relates to the climate action in a more global range. So many developing countries lack the economic resources to transition to green production and consumption, often relying on fossil fuels and less sustainable practices to support their economies and meet basic needs. How do you think these nations can effectively reduce their greenhouse gas footprint while still addressing their development challenges? And what role should wealthier countries play in supporting this transition? Thank you in advance.
The key unsolvable issue within these climate negotiations, and currently what is being discussed at COP29 is, of course, the question of losses and damages and who are eligible for paying these. And of course, since we are talking about climate justice, that has to mean that the countries historically and currently, both totally and per capita, responsible for the emissions and the climate crisis and the effects that we are seeing now must contribute more. It is a question of both science but also basic morality. This is a question that could be talked about forever and ever. So I don't want to take up much more time, but at least for me and for people who consider themselves to be climate justice activists, there's no alternative than those countries who both have the political and financial possibility of contributing more, but most of all have the responsibility, much more responsibility in this crisis, has to be the ones who are paying for that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah? Okay.
Միացված է, անշնորհակալություն։ Սիրելի Գրետա, ես հայերեն կներկայացնեմ իմ հարցը։ Ես ներկայացնում եմ Բաբուն տերա հայ կանանց նախաձեռնության որը հիմնվել է դեռևս 2 տարի առաջ Արցախը հայկական պահելու նպատակով։ Այս իմաստով ուզում եմ ձեզ շնորհակալություն հայտնել անձամբ եւ նաեւ մեր կազմակերպության անունից, որ դուք այստեղ եք աջակցելու Հայաստանին եւ Արցախի ժողովրդին այս դժվար ժամանակաշրջանում։ Դուք երիտասարդ գեղեցիկ կին եք եւ ես կուզենայի մի փոքր անձնական հարց ձեզ տալ։ Ինչպես եք դուք դիմակայում այն բոլոր դժվարություններին, որովհետեւ լինել երիտասարդ եւ աղջիկ եւ լինել քաղաքականության մեջ եւ լինել էկոակտիվիստ շատ դժվար է։ Մի փոքր կիսվեք մեզ հետ, որովհետեւ դա կլինի նաեւ ուղեցույց եւ ապագայի համար գեղեցիկ, այսպես ասած, հուշում, ինչպես լինել այդ ամենի մեջ եւ չընկրկել։ Շնորհակալություն եւ շնորհակալություն, որ դուք Հայաստանում եք եւ մեզ աջակցում եք եւ հուսով եմ, որ ձեզ մոտ ամեն ինչ լավ կլինի ապագայում։ Շնորհակալ եմ։
For me, I think a lot of why I and many others are activists and are engaging in this is that we have a choice to do it. The fact that I don't have to wake up every morning and fight for me and my people's right to exist is a sign that I am extremely privileged. Because for many, not the least the Armenians, just to exist is a matter of resistance. And I have the right to choose to engage in activism and to speak up of these issues, while many people don't have that possibility. And the fact that I have that opportunity, the possibility, means that I'm extremely privileged, and that I have a privilege means that I have a moral obligation to speak up. Everyone today has some sort of responsibility, and the gravity of that responsibility, of course, varies a lot. And if you are, like me, an extremely privileged person, by speaking up, I don't endanger my freedom or my life or my security in many, many ways, means that I have an extremely big responsibility. And I do not understand why there are not more people who can speak up and who can dedicate their lives to, for example, climate activism or human rights activism. I don't understand why there aren't more people doing it, because of course we have an extreme moral obligation to do it. And then of course, with standing up for those issues, especially being a young woman, of course comes with its difficulties, but it is nothing at all compared to what people who are subjected to these extreme human rights abuses have to experience every day. So it's all about perspective.
Thank you. Երևի լրագրողներից տանք մի հատ հարց այստեղ
Thank you. Thank you, Greta, for being in Armenia, in a land of ancient wisdom and contemporary challenges. I would like to ask, maybe you have heard about the Aurora Prize. It's a global humanitarian award of awakening humanity. And the founder of this prize is kept in Baku jail together with other Armenian and other nationality hostages. My question is, what would you recommend how to address to worldwide Armenian communities and diasporas? You, as a young girl who moved millions to action, how to act to raise awareness about this humanitarian issue? Thank you.
To the Armenian population, it really is not up to Armenians to take on that responsibility, because people are doing so much. People are dedicating their entire lives and all their time to raise awareness about these issues. It is really up to the international community now and should have been much long ago, to raise awareness about this and to speak up and do everything in their power to end their complicity and to demand freedom and justice and an immediate release to all the prisoners of war, the hostages and the political prisoners in Azerbaijan. Having that said, I think that the other panelists might be more eligible to. answer.
Okay, thank you, Greta. If you have any other questions to our panelists, because we have again second panel, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions to Greta. Any questions to panelists?
Yes, I have the mic. Hello.
Yeah. Okay.
That Azerbaijan is making, and so far we didn't heard any. What you will suggest them to do in COP29 now, right now?
Violence, but also that, of course, people, when it's not something that directly affects them, have a horrible tendency to not do anything about it. And coming back to COP, the fact that it is being held in Azerbaijan comes with so many different challenges, adding to the ones we have already said. How can we expect civil society to put real pressure on both the Azerbaijani states and also all world leaders who are currently there, when they are afraid of that what they can say and do may lead to punishment, and that the conditions for them being there are so extremely uncertain. That means, of course, both that the Azerbaijani state remains not being held to account in these cases, that they need to be held accountable, but also in the sense of the climate, that the world leaders who are there, their action and inaction on the climate and human rights abuses, of course, that are very linked to that, also remain not held to account. So in every possible way, it is extremely... it is a slap in the face, both for the people who are suffering from the climate crisis and those who are in every way suffering the consequences of the actions of the Aliyev regime, the Azerbaijani state. Because they are so actively silencing the voices who are bringing...
Okay, let's sum up this panel. We again will have the opportunity to ask questions to Greta during the last panel discussion. Thank you everyone for participating in this panel, and thank you, Greta. Thank you. Okay. Հիմա եկեք հրավիրենք մեր երկրորդ պանելին մասնակիցներին։ Պանելը կվարի Transparency International հասարակական կազմակերպության նախագահ Sona Ayvazyan.
Sona Ayvazyan will be leading the second panel from TI. I would like to invite the panel speakers. Armenia, Chairperson of an NGO dedicated to cultural protection, Yerevan from Green Armenia NGO, and Victoria Burnazyan from Ecolur. ways that Azerbaijan was able to cover up, to close the eyes of international players of all the war crimes that they were committing and anti-humane actions just because of their oil, and the corrupt activities and services. Azerbaijan is number one in the world, I believe, that is on almost all on the corruptive schemes by investigative journalists. Panama Papers, Pandora Papers, Heaven Papers, Swiss Confidential Secret. So Azerbaijani laundry house, you already know about this, and Azerbaijan has been very successfully able to cover up all the international leaders who could have an impact, who can come up with statements to identify what is happening. They were able to buy them and close their mouth, shut their mouth. Also about the human rights violations indirectly in Azerbaijan. So today, the fact that COP29 is organized in Azerbaijan is indeed it's the hypocrisy, double standards of the international community, unfortunately. Here we are united here, mainly our issues, we are united around the issues that we have and the crimes that have occurred against the people of Azerbaijan, people of Artsakh. But all around the world, I believe many people believe that COP29 in Azerbaijan shouldn't have been so because of climate justice, not only because of our own issues. So I would like to thank Greta for being here today, for raising these issues, raising awareness not only for climate justice, but also for the Artsakh issues, the crimes of Azerbaijan, and also the double standards and hypocrisy of international players, which I believe is a serious issue, and it shows the degradation of human values around the world. I would like to start with Yerevan, who presents the cultural heritage of Artsakh. It's a state agency aimed at maintaining the cultural heritage. During the previous panel, we spoke about the fact that people have the right to return. And they can hope that one day they will be able to return to their lands. But it seems that the state of Azerbaijan is doing everything to change the environment, to eradicate all Armenian elements from Artsakh. I would also like to thank Greta, through which, once again, the international so-called community might pay attention to the issues that came forward after the 2020 events in Artsakh. You might think that historical cultural heritage has nothing to do with the climate, but there is, because the historical landscape is destroyed. It's not only the natural climate, but the natural landscape is also destroyed. So just a few examples allow me to bring. In 2020, the genocidal actions unleashed against the population of Artsakh ended in September 2023, resulting in the ethnic cleansing of the Artsakhi population. So the land is deprived of its ethnic population. Azerbaijan started implementing their policy, which they had adopted in 1923, that is, removing all Armenian traces from the given area. So currently now they're trying to remove the Armenianness of Artsakh, and thus closing the topic of returning to the motherland. Because one of the speakers mentioned that when you speak about the motherland, this is a very heavy component. It's a strong component. And unfortunately, now we have a number of historical monuments which have just been destroyed. And within that, the church of Shushi, Hovannes Mugatich Church, was also there, which is called the Green Church. In April 23, it was found out that it had been destroyed to the foundations. Also, Berzor Surpambartsum Church has been destroyed fully. And we have also one more church that has been destroyed fully, that is St. Mary Church. And in parallel to that, other churches are being destroyed. The cross stones, monuments, historical monuments dedicated to the Artsakhi War, dedicated to the 45-44 war. This policy is towards different directions. Physical destruction of the historical remains, and the others, usurpation of the historical heritage. Azerbaijan considers our churches as Afghani or Udi churches. By doing this, they are saying that Armenian cultural heritage is foreign to this land. This is not Armenian, it is Afghani. And what is dangerous here is that the monument will not be destroyed, but we will still have a loss. Because Azerbaijan, on the level of Azerbaijan's president, when he visited the Hadrut region, Zakhavang Church, that video was widespread in the internet. They had ordered to eradicate all the writings on the stones, all the lithographs, which we can see in the churches. They said, please, these are fake lithographs that Armenians in the future, during the last 30 years, they have carved these lithographs as if these churches, to make these churches Armenians, to make them be considered Armenian. The second most important challenge during the last period, Azerbaijan is eradicating, just destroying all the settlements. We have some settlements which are non-existent, that is Karindak. The photos are also available online. One of these settlements are Mokhrines village. And during the last stage, also the Stepanakert settlements are being destroyed very, very intensively. In Stepanakert, we have a settlement from 19th century, which is totally destroyed. This also speaks about the fact that Azerbaijan is destroying all the historical facts on the ground about the Armenianness of the area. Of course, it is very painful about the cemeteries, destroying the cemeteries, because this is about the violence against family rights. Unfortunately, we have destroyed cemeteries in Askeran, Sarnakh village, in Hadrut Metztager cemetery. In Shushi, we have cemeteries destroyed. These are the information we only have from the internet. We know that there might be a larger number of cemeteries. It's just that the information we're getting is just from either satellite images or by Azerbaijani social media sources. The satellite images do not give us details. We just see that the monument is non-existent, that's it. But it is more than possible that it doesn't even... The most valuable lithographs might be removed from the monument, which is more valuable than the whole monument itself, which prove that this is Armenian heritage. So, in essence, this policy of Azerbaijan, what is historical cultural heritage? That is the memory of the nation. Now they are unleashed a war against the memory of our people. This is also psychological pressures put on the nation that the Artsakhi Armenians, so they do not have any hope of returning back. That is why they are very actively disseminating the photos and the images on how Armenian Stepanakert settlements are being destroyed fully, how the houses are being destroyed. Maybe they are trying to play with the psychology of the Artsakhi people, so they do not dream of ever going back, because they will not have a house there anymore. So probably that's what they're thinking about. It is very, very painful that in Azerbaijan today, the COP29 participants, none of them do not care in the Armenian cultural heritage which is being destroyed in Artsakh, and the double standards or the hypocrisy. None of the members seem to be caring about this. Sometimes you see it's you can fall into despair, but I would like to end my speech with a very emotional phrasing that says about the symmetries, the destruction of symmetries. I remember a woman from Stepanakert whose son was killed in the 90s during the wars again. And there was another article that the Pantheon, which was the symmetry, had been destroyed. And then they said, no, that was not true. That woman was crying. He said, I'm not a child. I know that they will destroy it, but I would like them to destroy it after I die. This is a great tragedy against humanity, which I believe that the international community, which is supposed to be as human rights defender, should try to prevent, to try to stop the Armeniophobic machine, which is the reason for human tragedy. I would like to remind you that Azerbaijan from 2022 is not allowing UNESCO representatives to enter Artsakh and study what is the situation of the cultural heritage monuments. And I would like to remind that Yerevan Aliyeva, starting from 2024, is a goodwill ambassador of UNESCO under the recent few years. And during her days, a number of the monuments have been destroyed. In Nakhichevan, Norjeva monuments have been destroyed. Well, she was the goodwill ambassador of UNESCO, and the cross stones, which were very peculiar and one of a kind. And Yerevan Aliyeva was able to hide this because aside from being the goodwill ambassador, they had also part of a corruption scheme. Azerbaijan had financed UNESCO, generally secretaries, family, and they had very warm relations between the Secretary General of UNESCO. And I believe their connections with UNESCO, their impact, or the power of the Azerbaijani financial resources will have a strong impact. Now I'd like to give the floor to Teminiya Nurkyan, Green Armenia. How they are seizing Armenian land, how it is violating the rights of Armenian people. Thank you for the invite. Thank you, Greta, for coming to Armenia to presenting our issues. And thank you for raising our environmental and not only environmental issues to the international community. Yesterday we were in Jedmuk, and she saw the situation on the border near the deer, where you can very clearly see where the Azerbaijani positions are, where are the Armenian positions. So our organization in 2021, after the war, we are speaking up, we are studying and investigating the water resources and the maps of water resources. And we have identified that in the and the bordering villages, we have serious issues relating to water resources. When Azerbaijan came forth, they came into Armenian lands. Our water sources, rivers, lakes, water reservoirs are now under their dominion, and villagers don't have access to the water sources to clean water. The government of Armenia after 2020, 2.2 billion AMD has been invested to create new infrastructure. so we can have new water systems for our citizens. This is very important to mention, that the villagers, they are unable to use the water basins because these dams are all of a sudden in neutral zones, and there are military powers around it, soldiers, and they cannot clean the water to use it. There's one film that is available online. There's a film called The Cost of Water, the water policy of Armenia, and it's about the water policy and maps of Armenia. The water architecture has changed in Armenia after 2020. In order to raise awareness about these issues, we have applied to state bodies very often in order to obtain accurate information. We have raised the attention of the international community to this issue as well. I would also like to speak about deforestation after the war, which is very important with the context of climate change. Wars lead to destruction, and also environmental and forested areas are destroyed. Take into account the fires that take place in the forests, creating new roads, new infrastructure. All these lead to environmental destruction. So we destroy forests. In 2021, if I'm not mistaken, the Goris-Kapan route, which was not accessible, new infrastructures were built. And because it was inaccessible, it was done by Azerbaijan. Pastures are also becoming not accessible, which are very important for the villagers. So sometimes when we do delimitation and demarcation, it is not in place, and villagers do not know where can they take their herds, or which grasslands can they use, which hay lands can they use, and as a result we have tragic results. That's all. Media agency, which is the deputy president. Azerbaijan blames Armenia, trying to counterbalance their negative impact, that negative blaming that many are blaming
Պիտի ասեմ իրենք շատ
I must
հաճախ
say
մեր
that very often
հանքարդյունաբերության
they speak
ոլորտն
about
են
our
թիրախավորում։
mining industry.
Մենք գիտենք մեր խնդիրները։
We know our issues. The environmentalists in Armenia very openly speak about the issues. We come up with some solutions for both social development. We have issues with the social development, but we have issues and we do not close an eye on these, and we do speak about them. But they have issues which they silence with beating, with threats, like the gold mines and the cyanide tailings. The residents were unhappy about it, but they were silenced. Armenia now is a member of Transparency for the Mining Industry, and we have very good ranking. So regarding their true stakeholders, we are very high on this ranking. Sharing information, we are very transparent. Anybody can enter and see who, what mine, where, how much, when, and where. All the mine information is transparent. But Azerbaijan, in 2017, they have been removed from this initiative because of violating human rights. There's a case about Azeri 7 company which have polluted the area, and the citizens have complained. But when you look at their articles, you see that this is a very large company and very important for the economy, but they do not raise issues about the environmental concerns, and the local media outlets, they are just silent about this. They invest immense amount of resources in sharing this misinformation, spreading this misinformation. Yesterday, I just saw in a few websites how they are blaming us for the pollution of Caspian Sea. The Caspian Sea is the water level is decreasing, and the reason is climate change. It's becoming shallow and shallower because water dams are being built on the rivers. And when they are creating these dams, these reservoirs, they're not letting the water out or in. And thus the water is becoming desertified, the biodiversity is being destroyed there. So first you should solve how to solve these issues instead of creating reservoirs on the rivers and not letting waters and rivers flow into the Caspian Sea. All of us, we speak about our situation from our own perspective, but we forget that all of us, we are citizens of the planet Earth. Turkey is building reservoirs. Armenia has less water. Azerbaijan is removing our roots from history. We're afraid. We're looking from a political perspective. We're looking from a national perspective. We're looking from a patriotic perspective. But on a global level, from the perspective of planet Earth, humanity is not taking this perspective on. And these wars that are existent today on planet Earth, these are very destructive to planet Earth. And we are living in this environment. We are having children. We are educating, bringing up the next generation. And we forget that we should take care of the house we live in, the planet we are on. This should be our goal, for us to keep our house clean for our children. Հարցի համար Գրետային այստեղ կհրավիրենք բեմարտակ, բայց խնդրում չկենտրոնանալ միայն Գրետայի վրա, այլ հարցեր տալ բոլոր բանախոսներին։ Հարցեր։ You can hear me. You can hear me, right? Նախավարաչը շնորհակալ եմ COP29-ի ձեր դիրքորոշման համար, շատ շնորհակալ եմ, որ այս հարցը բարձրաձայնեցիք, հայերի էթնիկ զտման թեման բարձրաձայնեցիք։ Շնորհակալ եմ։ Ինչպես գիտեք, բնապահպանական ճգնաժամը, էթնիկ զնումը եւ մարդու իրավունքների վայրագ խախտումները փոխկապակցված են այս ոլորտում։ Թույլ տվեք հարցնել արդյունավետ ակտիվիզմի եւ էկոակտիվիզմի մասին։ Ձեր Քանի որ դուք շատ մեծ փորձ ունեք այս ոլորտում, ինչ է կարծում ամենահամապատասխան եւ ամենաարդյունավետ եղանակը որն է, ինչպես է հնարավոր իրազեկման մակարդակը բարձրացնել այն հարցերի շուրջ, որոնք դեռ լուրը, դեռ հայտնի չեն, ինչպես կարելի է հայտնի դարձնել եւ ավելի քննարկված դարձնել այս բոլոր թեմաները։
Context is different. Every local context is different. What works in the sort of climate movement in Sweden does not necessarily work all over the world. So one key is to, of course, listen to the local perspectives and adapt. The local context to what actually works. But I think in general, when we talk about the climate crisis, as you say, these issues are interconnected. We cannot talk about climate justice and pretend to care about ecology and future generations if we are not addressing the sufferings of people today who are experiencing human rights abuses and violations on an everyday basis, people who are being systematically marginalized. I think in order to do that, it is invaluable and absolutely fundamental that we keep reminding ourselves, why are we doing this? Why are we speaking up on ecological values and perspectives? For me personally, protecting human rights and protecting the climate and the environment are all for the same reasons. It is based on a sense of caring about our fellow humans, caring about everyone, and demanding justice, freedom, and safety for everyone. That includes both social justice, economic justice, political justice, as well as climate and environmental justice. We cannot talk about one without also talk about the others. Because climate justice without social justice is not justice. And for the same reason is why we cannot continue pretending that conferences like the COP, which are continuously being held in states which have no basic respect for human rights and for the sense of justice, when they get to set the agenda on issues like the climate crisis, existential crises, which are also, when it boils down to it, based on the principle of justice, we cannot continue pretending that these conferences are going to lead to any meaningful change. But I would also love to hear the other participants' views on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Hey Greta, I'm Anna. I represent the youth organization Artsakh Alliance. Since 2020, we have been actively involved in social programs in Nagorno-Karabakh, and even during the blockade, we continue to provide volunteer assistance to those in need. And one of our co-founders of this organization was Ruben Vartanyan, who is now detained in Baku. My question concerns the youth. When you started your activism at 15, you spoke about how government inaction was depriving young people of their future. Here in Yerevan, there is thousands of young people of Nagorno-Karabakh who lost their homes, their universities, their ability to plan their future in September 2023. And my question is, what advice would you give them, based on your experience in your youth activism, on how to make their voices, make their voices heard internationally, and find new form of self-realization? Thank you.
I can answer briefly, but then again, I would also love to hear what the other panelists have to say. Of course, me and other young climate activists cannot in any way comprehend what these young people have gone through. And again, as we have touched upon earlier, we need to make sure that those who have lost everything, for those who whom life has been completely stopped, that we listen to their perspectives when we continue to fight for a future, because we cannot continue to be fighting for a future when these people have lost their present and when these people have been deprived of their current human rights. And that is, according to me, absolutely crucial. And as you say, young people are facing very, very different challenges compared to other people in the face of the climate emergency, since we are growing up in a world where we are constantly told that right now we are sacrificing our futures for the right to a very few people to live very, very comfortably and to make unimaginable amounts of money by exploiting people currently and in the future. So I think we need to give young people the tools to both understand that, but also in order to empower them to act against that. Because if we come together globally, young people, as we have seen many, many times before, student uprisings and, for example, school strike movements, when young people come together globally, there is a huge power in that. And once we reclaim that power that people are trying to take away from us, then there are very, very few limits to what we can achieve. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that people have the conditions to do that, and that we can plan ahead, because of course we cannot be focusing on the climate if we cannot put food on the table, and if we cannot go outside and hold up a placard without risking our freedom for that. So the fight for climate justice needs to go hand in hand with the fight for human rights.
Շնորհակալություն, բայց խնդրում եմ հարցեր տանք մի քանի հատ ուրիշ պանելիստներին, հետո Գրետային էլի կանդրադառնանք հարց պանելիստներին, որպես պանելիստներին,
Since also Greta asked for other panelists to share their opinion, I will also come up with a short advice. The youth have an advantage that they are young. They are full of energy. They have great potential for future. They have a positive thinking more than the elderly, but they do not understand yet. That's why I believe that the youth from Artsakh, of course, their life is now in two phases, before and after, and also the past and the future. And for the future, the youth must fight for that right to return, their right to return, but I advise the youth to be strong and to arrange their life correctly in Armenia and fight for their rights with their knowledge and skills, and to exercise their right to return. They are young, and I believe that they should be the pillars for their parents. They should be the engine and driving force for the Artsakh community. I would like to give a question to Mr. Stepanyan. He's not here. It's okay. I will ask the same question here. The international community is being blamed. Who agreed, who came to a consensus to organize COP29 in Baku. But unfortunately, we forget that. We forgot that the international community agreed and even promoted to organize COP29 in Armenia. Nobody mentioned that they agreed to organize COP29 in Armenia. Aside from the fact that Armenia removed its own candidacy on the first day of COP28. And the international community, as a result of that, started discussing COP29 to organize it in Bonn. And the Secretariat of the Convention Armenia asked the international community to organize it in Baku. When I say Armenia, I mean the Armenian government. Thank you. I would like that component to be taken into account. And the third point, they asked the international community to organize procedures and activities that the international community wants to do, unintelligible for the interpreter. As the future generation, the youth, that they carry the burden, they need to understand this. Indeed, this year Armenia should have had the climate change UN conference in Armenia. As a democratic society, to decrease the fossil fuel usage creates security issues, and it's an external political threat. However, Azerbaijan tried to create obstacles, and using the prisoners of wars, they used the prisoners of wars and forced Armenia to remove their candidacy, to remove their veto, and allow the conference to be organized in Azerbaijan. This shows how Azerbaijan organizes their activities, humanitarian issues such as the return of prisoners of war, how they use the POWs as tools. This is a very classical greenwashing example. I would also like to add that Armenia agreed to remove their candidacy to save the lives of the prisoners of wars. That was a result of negotiations. Unfortunately, part of the prisoners were returned. The others were still in Azerbaijan as hostages for future negotiations to have stronger positions. Please do not speak without the microphone. I would like to hear questions on behalf of the youth. Let's give the floor to those who have not raised questions yet. Պանելի բոլոր անդամներին է ուղղված իմ հարցը։
Azerbaijan, we know that they are not being really environmentally friendly. They don't really care about climate change, and their economy heavily depends on the mining of the fossil fuels, and we don't really see any intentions for them to break it down. The question is, what should be in our short-term and long-term to-do list as a nation? And dear Greta, what do you think you should have on your own to-do list for this issue, regarding this issue? Thank you.
I believe that each and every one of us have specific actions to take. If we see that hypocrisy, if we see that double standards that are used both in European countries and in American different cities, while crafting their policies, we should break that silence wall, gather accurate information, and disseminate that information. That's the minimum that we can do. Be united and joined to be sure that we refrain from fake events it's important when in your actions, at least you try to exclude fake information and only speak of the truth. To do lobbying for your events. We don't like doing lobbying. We think that it's just that when we do something little tiny, everybody should know about it, should spread information about it, everybody should be informed about it. Unfortunately, that's not what we do. We specifically, as a state, pay attention, both our diplomacy, we should pay attention to our diplomacy, and as citizens, as individuals, as foundations, we should be able to pay attention. We should be clearly able to devise our actions, especially from the lobbying perspective. Or else it turns out that Azerbaijan is very, very aptly they're prepared to conduct their lobbying activities, but we're unable. Why? We should remember that we are in an information war. And all our steps, all our actions, we should think very well, plan in advance. Azerbaijan uses our own information to blame us, to accuse us, to disgrace us. They are spending huge amounts of resources. This is done on the state level. This is done with so-called environmental alliances. On the state level, on the level of their ministries. For us here, it's just a civil society, which they are self-organized, so to say. Because we are a democratic country, so there is no pressure on us that you should do this, you should do this. We're just self-organizing the civil society. We decide what steps we want to take. We should be alert, and we should follow that information, and be able to deny the accusations that Azerbaijan is spreading. If we remain quiet, if we do not respond it, in 1 minute you find a vast amount of information, accusatory information. So we need to be extremely united for us to raise the ranking and reputation of our country and to fight against false accusations. Two more questions and that's it. Ես հայ եմ Բելգիայից եւ մենք միասին ստեղծել ենք անտարապատման գազམ་ակերպություն եւ լսելով պանելին ես լիովին հասկանում եմ վիկտիմայի արդարությունը ինչպես է կամ մարդու իրավունքները ինչպես են մեկմյուսի հետ ուղղակիորեն փոխկապակցված եւ իսկապես երբ դուք տեսնում եք երբ մարդու կյանքին կոպիտ ասած բանի տեղ չեն դնում ապա իսկապես բացասական դիրքորոշում թե մտածած թե ինչու պիտի բնաշրջակա միջավայրի մասին է հոգան մարդիկ, եթե մարդու մասին հոգ չեն տանում։ Նաև հավատում եմ բրան բոլոր երիտասարդները վրաստական նրանք կարող են գործողություն կատարել,
As all of us, as Temine was saying, we have to take care of our planet, and it's a question for all of us. We are an organization planting trees and doing reforestation, and hopefully by that bringing a better future. I have daughters, 3 daughters, which are a little bit older than you, and I felt it's just completely also unjust that we are, our generation, and maybe some bit younger than me, we are destroying the planet, and we are leaving this destruction for the next generation. This is absolutely unjust. So with this, I have a question, actually 2. I would like to invite you, if you have some free time, to visit our replanting sites. We're reforesting as we speak. And also, if you're staying a little bit longer, we're going to be having a concert. And each of us, you're all invited to come and participate at the concert. On Monday, there is a concert where all tickets go to planting trees entirely. 100% will go to planting trees. Thank you very much. If you're free, let us know.
Շնորհակալություն մեդիային հարց եւ ձեզ հնարավորություն կտանք եւ հարցերի
trying to discuss who will ask the question. There are many questions, not enough time. Tomorrow with Greta in front of the UN office at 4 o'clock, we're going to be doing action there. We're going to raise the issues related to the Artsakh conflict, humanitarian issues, cultural heritage, about the prisoners of wars, etc., and the impact on climate change. So please, you can come and ask your questions. Questions you can respond.
Այսպեսի արտահայտություն եւ որակավորում տվեցիք այնուամենայնիվ մի շարք համաշխարհային պետությունների ղեկավարներ միջազգային
of international official states, they did participate in COP29. Could you please say that what is your message that you would like to share to them? What should they say? Were they forced to participate in COP29? Was there something that they had to? Today in Armenia, what priorities do we have in Armenia, and what solutions do you see?
Lost in the translation, but I didn't fully hear your question. But so maybe someone who speaks Armenian is better to answer that.
Your personal messages, but you can maybe we can answer. Okay. Գրետան արդեն ասում է, որ ինքը արդեն շատ բան ասեց այսօր, այդ բոլորը երևի նաև հասցեագրվում է մյուսներին։
Ես երևի պատասխանեմ, քանի որ մենք այսօր կոպի շրջանակներում ենք հավաքվել, խոսենք
Հայաստանի framework of COP. Let's speak about the priorities of the climate issues of Armenia. I must say that speaking about climate justice, being one of the countries that has the lowest levels of emissions, of greenhouse emissions, we are very vulnerable because the increase in Celsius is more than the average. And across the Hydrometeorological Center, the average is higher by 1.6%. This is a serious issue for us. On the other level is the water decrease in the water resources that we have. We are registering water scarcity in our country. We should be able to manage our water resources in order for us not to lose the agricultural developments in our country and also the economic activities. The third issue that we have is that we should have adaptive measures. In order to be able to fight against the climate changes and to work in a new environment. The agricultural should have a new perspective to this situation. We have a large number of droughts. We have desertified areas which are being desertified. Desertification is common today. Decisions are being made for climate adaptability. They are part of the policies and strategies. But when you go down to the ground, when you go to the communities, you see that these decisions have not made it to the communities yet. They have not been implemented. So our communities need our support for raising awareness, for us to be able to face these challenges and come up with good solutions. Also to be able to attract resources from green international funds to solve climate issues. I'll speak about this very briefly. I believe that the core of all issues is education and lack of knowledge, especially eco-education. If our population was more aware and knowledgeable, we would be able to demand from the state, from the government, and from the international community to raise our voice to higher levels. Our organization and in the communities are the activities that we do in the communities. We see that eco-education is of utmost importance. It is this eco-education that helps us to move out of the mud we are in to come up with new innovative solutions, which is eco-friendly, environmentally friendly. It does not drain and use the last drop of resources that we have in the environment. Yes, I do join the most important message that Victoria said, that this 1 cup of water, if we try to purchase it at the airport or in another location, it will be 500 drums, $1 or more. If there are other places where it's 100 drums, you notice how expensive water is. When we come, our legal consciousness level is on a higher level. We will value water. There's no life without water, right? So it's a very primitive definition, but we'll start valuing what we have. We should value water as a source of life. That's what I think each one of us should do. Let's sum up the panel and 2 final remarks. Very brief, please, because we're behind the agenda. One question and that's it. Yes, by Gasparanam. Բացառիկյուրին է ուղղված մեր իմ հարցը սիրելի Գրետա.
But there was no enough time. You mentioned about the hypocrisy of Azerbaijan as a state. You mentioned about the international community of being guilty for being silenced regarding the atrocities, ethnic cleansing and whatsoever. But no one here mentioned about Russia being guilty of what happened in Artsakh. I want to remind you that November 9 statement by authority of war criminal Vladimir Putin was signed, and according to this statement, it was the obligation of Russia to keep Lachin corridor open. It was an obligation of Russian so-called peacekeepers to provide safety and security of Armenians in Artsakh. And also, unfortunately, the Prime Minister of Armenia last year in September stated in UN that there is no direct threat of Armenians in Artsakh. It's not just to tell about half-truth. We have to tell about the truth whole as it is. So just to remind you of these facts, and please mention this in your future endeavor. And again, thank you for your great support. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you.
Okay. Պանելը վերջացնենք եւ պանելը վերջ, շնորհակալություն ելույթների համար. Thank you for our side event, and I want to invite ուզում եմ հրավիրել տիկին Մարգարիտա Քարամյանին, ով ճիշտ է էքսպերտային կարծիքները կարևոր են, բայց կարևոր են նաև անձնական պատմությունները. Տիկին Մարգարիտան կներկայացնի իր անձնական փորձառությունը պատերազմի իր եւ խնդրում եմ նաեւ որ թարգմանեք հյուրի համար Լուիզա կարող ես թարգմանել հա ունենք համաժամանակ.
The interpretation is okay, right? Ms. Margarita Karamian, please, could you share your story? We'd love to hear your personal experience about your family. You can come speak from here or there, wherever you'd like. I'd like to greet you all. First of all, thank you so much for giving this opportunity. to speak about specific examples. I am from Hadrut. I was in Hadrut until October 8th. On the 10th of October, the Azeris entered Hadrut and the neighboring villages. And atrocities of the worst kind took place there. I will just give you certain numbers. 23 peaceful citizens were killed in their own houses or in the areas next to their houses. 16 persons are yet have disappeared, lost. 4 women and 2 children have not been found. Two of the persons killed were my relatives. They were a couple, David and Nina Davtyans, who are from Vartashat village, which is located 3 kilometers from Hadrut. Nina Davtyan was blind, 82 years old. Her husband, David, was 86 years old. Nina Davtyan was shot multiple times in her own bed. There are 16 bullets. She was fusilated. And her head was also shot by an automatic gun, machine gun. David Gatsan was beheaded in his own garden. They found their bodies 2-3 months later. Gamo Davtyan was killed in his own backyard in Kemeragoj village. He had mental issues and relatives were unable to convince him to leave the village. Lena, who was a refugee from Baku, he was fusilated. His body was cut into pieces, hand in hand with her 2 neighbors, and they buried in their own houses, 3 of them in one grave. All the 3 bodies were thrown in one tomb. His husband, Benny Kakopyan. We publicly saw the videos, how he was raising his arms. They are taking him as a prisoner of war, but their destiny we do not know yet. Because the body, they have not given us the body. 2 other men have been fusilated in the center of Hadrut, in the square. The video was also available on the internet. All of you might have seen that. They have wrapped them with the Artsakhi flag, and they have fusilated 2 of them together. 1 man was also fusilated in Norashen village, who was also from Baku, living in Norashen. Ernest Hararutunian was a person with health issues, was in bed. They couldn't remove him because the wives were with him until the last minute. The Azeris were near their houses. They removed the wife, but they were unable to remove Ernest because he was bedridden. They cut the body into pieces. They cut off the tattoos from the body, ripped it apart, ripped it off. And then 2 women who were lost from Melikashin village. They were a mother and a daughter. The mother was a prisoner back in the 1990s. She was also a prisoner of war in the 1990s, but this time they were unable to find them. They refused to leave the village. They had 2 other persons who were lost. They had health issues. It was also impossible to convince them to leave the village. My employee's father and brother were prisoners of war. The father was taken all the way up to Baku, and then with the other 44 prisoners of war. During the first stage, they brought them back. That person was half a person, half dead, half alive, because his body was fully not only blue and bruised, but because of the beatings, but half a body was remaining, the hand and the feet. They would tie the hands and the feet and hang them from a high place. That 76-year-old old man. After returning, he just lived 1 year and died the next day of the blockade, the second or third day when the blockade started, because when they said that the Azerbaijani people blocked the road, he was so scared, he said, close all the doors. So he went through all the mental memory, how he will become a prisoner again, and from that fear, he died from that fear. And his son, Arsen, they kept him 2 months in Hadrut. And they've killed him to death, tortured him to death. When they found the body 2 months later, the sister went and took a photo of the body and the morgue. The nightmares that these people have been through, the horrors they've been through is just unimaginable. I have prepared 10 films of with all the videos and the photos about these cases. The terror. We cannot share that video because of ethical norms, because they're so horrific, and not to terrorize the same people when they see their relatives, how severely tortured they are, and also they block us when we share that information. So all that has been sent to the International Court, ICJ, and international advocacy organizations. We have sent it to them. All the people who have remained in Hadrut were being killed severely, tortured severely, and then killed. Azerbaijan desecrated the cemeteries. They have defiled the cemeteries. There were a few monuments in Hadrut, both for the participants of the war, to the heroes, and other monuments as well. There were all these, they were defiled, they have been shot, all the rock stones, cross stones have been removed, destroyed. They have removed the crosses on all the churches from Van, Hadrut, etc., different places. They also defiled the Vartashat village cemetery, and their target mainly was the heroes of the First War. Their photos and images, all of them, they have been destroyed. We have used this information in our films and the photos and the images. Azerbaijan also has called environmental damage to Artsakh. If you remember, the images that were published during the blockade, the Sarsan Dam was fully dried up. Why? Because Artsakh was without electricity. There was no electricity, so they had to use the Sarsan Dam to create water. During the war, fungicide and phosphorus bombs, explosives were used, which caused environmental severe damage to the forests. All the forest of Hadrut was burnt down in 2020. And yes, it is true. And ecology and environmental actions are for human beings. It is done for the humanity. But if the life of humanity is not worth a penny, that means that all other struggles are for nothing. Apologies. We're very apologies, Mrs. Margarita, that we forced you to relive all the moments and tell us the stories. We apologize. And today we envisage one more speech, which will be on Zoom online. Apologies, I'm unable to continue moderating after Mrs. Margareta's stories. We're joining the second Zoom, and our second speaker is a climate activist, Arshak Makichan. Hello, my name is Arshak. I speak Armenian, but I will give my presentation in English. Ասացեմ, որ պետք է կոպուսանանի մասին խոսին, և թե ինչ է տեղ ունենում Բաքուում, անշուշտական հայդորեն, սա աղետ է։ Եթե Ադրբեջանը գոնե ձևացնեին այն ինչ որ ձևացնում են, բայց բոլորս էլ գիտենք, որ այն ատելությունը, որ նրանք ունեն հայերի հանդեպ, որ սա սկսում է Ադրբեջանում։ Իմ մեծ պապիկի եղբայրը 20-րդ դարի սկզբում սպանվել է Բաքուում, իմ տատիկն ու պապիկը նրանք պետք է լքեին Նախիջևանի հանրապետությունից, բոլոր, ինչպես նաև մյուս բոլոր հայերի հետ մեկտեղ պետք է թողնեին։
Իջիվանից Ադրբեջան, then I'm Azerbaijani maybe, but I'm not. I'm Armenian.
Թեև հրավեր ունեի այս կոնֆերանսին, ինձ վիզա չտվեցին։ It was a
time of a severe economic crisis because of the blockade imposed by Azerbaijan, and my parents, they had to migrate to Russia. I don't but here I am. What happened in Artsakh, the genocide, made me think a lot about who I am, who we are. I always thought we should focus on the future, on the good things, fighting for the environment, human rights. But now I think a lot about our past. History will keep repeating itself until we unite and try to resist these colonial powers. I know that I am a bit different from many other Armenians that live in Armenia. I have had completely different experience. I speak English better than Armenian. I don't like crash. But I'm with you, and whatever happens tomorrow, we will be fighting together. I also think it's important to speak here, since this is an alternative to COP29. This is not a side event. For the release of all Armenian hostages and also all Azerbaijani political prisoners in Baku. I've lived under a dictatorship by myself, and I'm lucky that I'm not in prison. We may disagree with the Azerbaijani opposition, but democracy and the dialogue are the only solutions. It's difficult to be an opposition in a dictatorship. And honestly, when I was part of the opposition in Russia, and I am still part of the opposition, it was hard even for me to realize what colonialism and imperialism is. The Azerbaijani opposition is not perfect, but they are fighting against our common enemies. And I hope that in the future we will be able to work together with them to make an alternative future possible. I hope that we will be able to return to Artsakh, also Nakhichevan, or Western Armenia. But for that we need allies and a vision for the future. Dictators are strong until they fail, and we are weak until we unite. So it's really inspirational that we are here together with also a lot of international activists from all around the world. A lot of people are organizing actions in Italy, in Germany, in the UK, to speak up against this hypocrisy in Baku. And it's really great that Greta was able to join you in Armenia, and I hope that I will be able to join you later when I will finish my studies. I think it's really important that we gathered today to speak up about climate justice. Maybe it's kind of a new topic for a lot of Armenians, because when you are at war, it's really difficult for you to think about future, but climate justice, wars and colonialism, they are really connected. And I think it's really great that we are connecting these issues together today. And yeah, thanks for inviting me to this really interesting conference. And it was really important for me to listen also to the others. I think not just to Greta, but also to the perspectives of all other Armenians. And yeah, I hope that we will be able to continue to work together in the future.
Շնորհակալություն Արշակ եւ շնորհակալություն որ նշեցիր.
Thank you that you mentioned that Azerbaijan also created obstacles as imprisoning all people who speak about the peace agenda with Armenia. And as Arshak mentioned, he also had applied, and if indeed that conference was for peace, then why wasn't he granted a visa? He wanted to go to Baku, but he was refused entry to the country. Thank you for being a leader and speaking about the peace agenda. I would also like to remind you how the blockade of Artsakh started. Again, it was as if it was environmentalists blocked the Lachin corridor, which was followed by an ethnic cleansing, which is a crime against humanity and punishable. As a message to the international community, it is of utmost importance that people do not allow that Azerbaijan, that aggressors and dictators like Azerbaijan host and speak of such topics and host such conferences and speak about human rights. This can be a precedent for other authoritarian states, and it's very, very dangerous. Thank you to the participants of the conference. And once again, I'd like to remind you that tomorrow, all of us together, Greta as well, will join us in front of the UN office at 4 o'clock. We'll have a protest. For organizing such an important conference in a country like Azerbaijan. Thank you to all participants. And thank you for encouraging this nonsenseness. Thank you for your attention. Grace was interpreting for you. Please do not, unfortunately, we were behind the agenda, so journalists, we will not be able to speak with Greta.